I trained a virgin girl to become the perfect lover for my own son. And no, I don't expect you to forgive me. Some stories aren't told because they're shameful. Mine was buried because it crosses every moral line a mother should never even approach. But I crossed it anyway, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear that my son would end up alone, unloved, broken. So I created love, manufactured it, with a girl who didn't even know what desire meant. Until I taught her. It started the day I saw my son staring out the window for hours. Not blinking, not breathing, just broken. He was 26. Brilliant, beautiful, and completely shattered by a woman who never deserved him. Her name doesn't matter now. What matters is the way she left, taking not only his heart, but every last shred of self-worth he had. He was never the same after her. Not even close. You see, when you're the ex-wife of a millionaire, a real one, not the Instagram kind, people expect a certain performance from you. Grace, class, detachment. But I never stopped being a mother. And when I saw my son sinking deeper into that silence, I knew something inside me had shifted. Something dangerous. I had divorced his father years ago, walked away from a life of private jets and crocodile smiles. I took my share of the fortune and built something quieter, smaller, my own foundation for girls in need of shelter, education, direction. My way of atoning for the years I stood silent in the gilded prison of our marriage. That's where I first saw her, leaning against the doorframe of the art room, barefoot and hesitant, a worn book pressed to her chest like it was the last thing keeping her upright. Her name was Clara. She had the kind of presence that whispered instead of shouted, eyes that looked down more than up, lips that twitched every time someone said, love. She reminded me of myself at 17, before the pearls and prescriptions. And just like that, the idea began to form. I didn't plan it at first. It was just a flicker, a what if. What if she could pull him out of it? What if her innocence could absorb his pain? What if she could love him purely, without the poison of the world we both came from? What if I made that happen? Clara had never been kissed. I asked carefully one rainy afternoon. She just blushed and shook her head, brushing a hair behind her ear like it was a confession. Boys scare me, she'd said, almost laughing. I felt it then, that rush of dark hope. It wasn't just about saving my son. It was about controlling something again, creating something real, unbreakable. If love had hurt him, maybe I could reverse engineer it. Teach her to hold him the way he needed. Teach her to see past his coldness, to give him warmth, touch, devotion. No mother should think these things, but I did. And worse, I acted on them. He wasn't always like that. When he was little, he used to smile in his sleep. I remember watching him through the baby monitor, tiny fists curled up under his chin, and thinking, maybe I didn't ruin everything. But guilt is patient. It waits, even when you pretend to move on. My son Julian was born into a world of curated perfection. His father, Victor, was the kind of man who made deals over dinner and broke spirits before dessert. I watched that man cheat, lie, manipulate, and I smiled through it all, because that's what a good wife does in those circles. But I never imagined the silent damage it would do to our child. Julian saw more than I thought. The shouting behind closed doors, my tear-stained silk blouses, the way I flinched when Victor touched me in front of guests. And worse, the way I pretended it was all fine the moment the door opened. He learned love was painful, that it demanded silence, that it always ended. So when he met his first real girlfriend, Emily, I was hopeful. She was bright, ambitious, clever. The kind of girl who could thrive in our world. But there was something cold about her, too. Something calculated. She loved Julian the way women love a last name, not a man. And when she left very publicly, very cruelly, he didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just disappeared inside himself. For weeks. I tried everything. Therapy, retreats, distractions. But the spark in his eyes was gone. He came home one evening and sat at the piano, the one thing he used to touch like it was holy, and just stared at the keys for over an hour. Not one note. That's when I stopped being his mother and became something else. Something quieter, strategic, intentional. I told myself I was helping him, but deep down, I knew I was trying to fix what I broke, my marriage, my silences, the legacy I passed on. So when I saw Clara again, helping an elderly woman paint a forget-me-not in the garden, her hands stained blue, her hair caught in the breeze, I didn't just see a girl, I saw a clean slate. And I decided in that moment that I would rewrite the ending for my son, even if it meant crossing the line between mother and puppeteer, even if it meant creating a lie wrapped in innocence, even if it meant dragging Clara into a story she never asked to be part of. Clara wasn't like the other girls in the program. Most came angry, defiant, arms folded across their chests like shields. But she arrived like a question no one dared to answer. Quiet, watchful, not shy, something deeper. Like life had taught her early to expect very little. She was 18, barely, a foster kid shuffled through more homes than birthdays, always polite, always agreeable. The kind of girl no one remembered, except the ones who wanted something from her. But I remembered her. She volunteered more than she spoke, helped the staff without being asked, smiled like she didn't quite believe she was allowed to. Her silence wasn't emptiness. It was full of stories she'd never had the space to tell. That kind of silence, it stays with you. One afternoon, I found her in the library, curled in a corner with a book of poetry. I asked her what she liked about it. She looked at me, startled, then whispered, "The words say what I feel," without me having to say it. That stayed with me too. I began inviting her to tea, just the two of us. I told myself it was mentorship, guidance, but that wasn't the truth, not really. The truth is, I was studying her. I asked her about love, about men, about dreams. She didn't have many. Love, she said, was something that happened to other people, the ones who had soft childhoods and parents who stayed. Men, she avoided them, said they confused her, said they looked at her like she was glass, delicate or dangerous, depending on their mood. She confessed, almost ashamed, that she had never been kissed, never been touched, never even held someone's hand. "That's not something girls like me get," she said. And in that moment, I saw it. She was untouched, untamed, a blank canvas. And I had the brush. It was wrong. I knew it, but it felt, strangely, like fate. As if she had appeared not by coincidence, but by design. A chance to give my son a pure beginning. A girl without past lovers, without comparison, without bitterness. I began to shape her. At first, it was subtle. I gave her books on relationships. Let her watch old films with powerful love stories. We talked about desire, what it meant to be seen, to be wanted. I asked her how she imagined love should feel, and when she couldn't answer, I told her. I told her love was devotion, service, emotional safety, softness and strength and balance. She soaked up every word like it was scripture. And slowly, Clara began to change. But I didn't see then, or maybe I chose not to, that I wasn't creating love. I was manufacturing need. We began with posture. It sounds simple, but the way a woman carries herself changes how the world responds. I showed her how to walk into a room without apologizing for being in it. Shoulders back, chin slightly lifted, not arrogant, inviting. Mysterious. Clara followed every instruction like a dance, like it meant something deeper than it looked. And maybe it did. Maybe standing tall was her way of unlearning years of invisibility. Then came the voice. I coached her to speak slower, softer, to let silence settle between words, to allow room for curiosity. Men, I told her, are drawn to mystery like moths to flame. She listened, practiced, even rehearsed conversations with me in the mirror, but it wasn't just about seduction. That would have been easier to forgive. No, I taught her how to see someone, to pay attention to small things, the way a man touches his glass when he's nervous, the flicker in his eyes when he feels safe, the unspoken weight behind his words. I taught her how to listen like her soul depended on it. And somewhere in between less eyeliner and more questions about his childhood, I stopped seeing her as a girl and started seeing her as a creation. My creation. I chose her clothes, delicate but not weak. A palette of soft blues and ivory, trust and purity. I told her the way to a man's heart wasn't through food, but through safety. If he feels safe around you, he'll never want to leave. That's what I believed, what I wanted to believe. And Clara, poor, earnest Clara, believed me. She began to glow under the attention, not from men, from me. She'd never had someone invest in her like this. She began calling me Miss Elena with warmth instead of formality. She'd touch my arm when laughing, tell me I made her feel seen. It should have stopped there, but I was in too deep. I introduced her to Julian by chance. A book signing at a gallery. He was reserved, charming in a cold sort of way. Clara looked at him like he was from another planet, and Julian looked at her like he couldn't believe someone so soft still existed. It worked. They talked. They smiled. He offered to walk her to the train. And for the first time in over a year, I saw him breathe. That night, Clara came back glowing. "He's different," she said. He asked about me, not just where I lived or what I did. He asked why I liked poetry. No one's ever asked me that. And I, selfish, grieving, obsessed, smiled. I had made something beautiful. But beauty, I would soon learn, doesn't come without consequence. Because while I was busy crafting the perfect lover, I forgot to teach her how to protect her own heart. And she was falling. Fast. At first, it was subtle, a shift in Julian's tone, a new softness in his voice when he spoke of a girl he'd met. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. I knew it was Clara. He invited her to lunch a week after the gallery, then dinner, then long walks through the sculpture park near his building. She would return from these outings quieter than usual, eyes distant, as if still caught in the warmth of his attention. He began sending flowers, white orchids, always white. He said they reminded him of her. I remember her holding them to her chest like they were proof she was real. "No one's ever sent me anything before," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the word before, and I should have stopped it then. But instead, I leaned in. I encouraged her. gave her tips on how to respond, what to wear, how to lean into his silences to make them feel like intimacy instead of awkwardness. I knew my son's heart better than anyone, his fear of being too much, his craving to be truly understood. Clara, she fit into that shape perfectly. Too perfectly. One evening, he called me, just to talk. That hadn't happened in months. He said, "There's something about her, Mom. She listens like she's memorizing me." I felt a sting in my chest. Guilt? Jealousy? Pride? Maybe all three. I had designed this very reaction, and yet hearing it come from his mouth made it feel realer than I was ready for. They were falling, but Julian didn't fall like ordinary men. When he gave himself, it wasn't in pieces, it was all at once. And suddenly, Clara became the sun around which his entire world spun. He took her to his father's estate, the one I left behind in the divorce. A place full of ghosts I had no intention of revisiting. Clara returned dazed. "It's so big, Elena." So cold, but he held my hand the entire time. She smiled like a child in a fairy tale. I watched her smile fade as she asked, "Do you think he loves me?" And for the first time, I couldn't answer. Because it wasn't a game anymore. It wasn't a plan or a strategy or a salvation project. It was love, and love is chaos. It happened slowly at first, so slowly I didn't even recognize it as change. A missed tea session, a shorter reply to my texts, a distracted look in her eyes, like she was hearing a music I couldn't follow. Clara was no longer the girl I had trained. She was blooming, boldly, recklessly. One afternoon, she arrived at my townhouse in a crimson dress. Not the soft pastels I used to choose for her, but something she had picked, something that clung to her like confidence. She looked radiant, older, like a woman in love with herself as much as with the man who adored her. And suddenly, I wasn't her guide anymore. I was obsolete. She didn't ask my opinion on what to say, what to wear, how to act. She began making her own choices, laughing louder, questioning things I'd taught her. "Why does he have to be the strong one all the time?" she asked once. "Why can't I protect him too?" I felt something inside me fracture. I had crafted a script and she was going off book. Worse, Julian noticed. He liked her fire. He admired her independence. She challenged him, teased him, made him feel alive. And in the spaces between them, the places I never intended her to reach, a real relationship was growing, one I had not authored. She stopped calling me Miss Elena, just Elena. It was a small thing. But it pierced me, and then came the evening that broke everything. I had invited her over for tea. She declined, said she was tired. But later, I saw a photo on social media. Clara, barefoot in Julian's loft, wearing one of his shirts, sipping wine, her hair messy, her smile unguarded, and I knew. They had slept together. I had taught her how to seduce him, but I hadn't taught her how to navigate intimacy, how to protect herself once emotions bled into skin. I had equipped her for performance, not reality, for desire, not the morning after. And now she was no longer mine to mold. She belonged to herself, to him, to something I couldn't predict or rewrite. I watched from the shadows of my carefully curated life as Clara, the girl I had once chosen because she was blank, became someone vibrant, flawed, full of contradictions. She was no longer my masterpiece, she was a woman, and that terrified me. It was bound to happen. Secrets, no matter how delicately woven, always unravel, especially when they're stitched into the skin of someone who's finally learned to feel. I don't know exactly how Clara found out. Maybe it was a careless comment from a staff member at the foundation. Maybe Julian mentioned something in passing about the night they just happened to meet. Or maybe she simply began putting the pieces together, the tailored timing, the guidance that had always felt a little too perfect. But one evening she came to my house, unannounced. She stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, trembling, but not from the cold. Her eyes, always so gentle, now held something I hadn't seen before. Betrayal. I know, she said. Just that, nothing more. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to wrap my shame in good intentions. But she cut me off. You chose me, not because I was right for him, but because I was empty enough for you to fill. Her voice was calm. That made it worse. I thought you cared about me, she said. But you cared about your son, about control, about rewriting your own story, not mine. Every word hit like a slap. I loved him, she whispered. I still do. But now I don't know if it was ever mine. Was it love, or was it choreography? I reached for her, but she stepped back. You taught me how to be what he needed, she said. But you never asked what I needed, and there it was. The truth I'd buried under every well-meaning lesson and every soft-spoken manipulation. I hadn't helped Clara. I had used her. Not with cruelty, with desperation, with fear, with love that had twisted into something unrecognizable. She left without another word. The sound of the door closing behind her was quieter than it should have been, but it echoed through the walls of my house like thunder. Julian called me the next day. He didn't yell, didn't ask questions, just said, "How long, Mom?" I couldn't answer. He hung up. I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of a plan that had unraveled into loneliness. I had lost them both, not because they betrayed me, but because I betrayed what love was supposed to be. The silence after they left wasn't immediate. At first it was filled with echoes, her footsteps in the hallway, his laughter downstairs, the faint scent of her perfume on the cushions she used to politely straighten every time she visited. But then, like a slow tide, silence settled in, thick, absolute. I stopped receiving his calls. No more late-night texts. No quiet "thank you, Mom," after a tough conversation. He disappeared from my life with the same quiet grace I had once tried to manufacture in Clara. She didn't come back to the foundation. No message, no confrontation. Just absence, and in that absence, a mirror. I stood in my kitchen one morning, holding the porcelain teacup she had once chosen for herself, and I broke. Not with screams, not with drama, but with a soft, guttural sound, the sound of a woman who finally sees the wreckage she created with the best of intentions. I had tried to fix my son. I had tried to manufacture healing, sculpt love out of a girl's longing, and cover my guilt in the skin of mentorship. But I had only taught Clara how to please, not how to be whole. And Julian, my beautiful boy, I'd turned the one person who made him feel alive into a lie. a living betrayal wrapped in lace. He'll never trust me again, and he shouldn't. I watched from a distance as they slowly, cautiously tried to rebuild. I heard through a friend that they moved to a small apartment near the sea, that she was taking painting classes, that he was composing again. She stayed. Even after knowing the truth, that was the final wound. Because Clara wasn't just lovable, she was forgiving. She offered him something I never could. Something I thought I could create, but had never truly understood. Unconditional love. No manipulation, no design, just love. I don't blame them for keeping me away. I don't deserve a place in their life anymore. But some nights, when the wind howls against the windows, I still whisper her name like a prayer, not for her to come back, but for her to never become like me. I saw them once, just once, since it all ended. It was in a small seaside town I used to visit in my 20s, long before marriage, before money, before the performance of being someone's wife. I went there alone, needing distance from my carefully curated life. And there they were. Clara was barefoot, her sundress fluttering in the wind, holding Julian's hand as they walked along the shore. He looked at her the way Victor never looked at me, with reverence, with peace, not possession, not performance, just love. They didn't see me, and I didn't call out, because I understood, in that moment, that I no longer belonged in the story I tried to write. I had spent so much of my life trying to orchestrate outcomes, to protect, to prevent, to fix. But love, real love, doesn't obey rules. It doesn't follow scripts. It blooms in chaos. It endures in honesty, and it only survives when it's free. Julian had found that with Clara, not because of me, but in spite of me. I used to fear that he'd be hurt again, that the scars I gave him would become his future, but now I fear something else. I fear Clara will love him the way I loved Victor, blindly, obediently, endlessly, even when it hurts. Because that kind of love isn't noble. It's prison dressed as devotion, and Clara, she deserves better than that. So does Julian. That's the paradox of being a mother. We want to be the reason they rise, but often we become the shadow they must outrun. So I watch from afar now. I light a candle for them every Sunday, not because I believe it changes anything, but because it's all I have left. And sometimes, just sometimes, I allow myself to believe that what I did, however flawed, however selfish, led them to each other. That maybe, through my worst mistake, they found their beginning. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. Stories like mine aren't easy to tell or to hear, but if it made you feel something, share your name and where you're watching from in the comments. I'll be reading every word quietly from wherever I am.